So we're going to talk about why Russia is doing what it's doing with these huge missile strikes. In one way, it doesn't make sense, and in another way, it really does. And I'm going to try to explain what I mean by that. So, if you're just trying to indiscriminately bomb civilians in order to, make them knuckle under, that doesn't really work. I mean, the Battle of Britain, Dresden, there's ample. Um, Information from history that shows us that this kind of strategy doesn't work. Now, I'm not sure that that's what the Russians are doing. I think there's more to it, and I think that they really believe that they're doing more than they actually are. But let me just lay out my case. We're going to start by looking at RT and seeing what they have to say. There's just this 3-minute clip where you're hearing them talk about, what they're doing and how they're responding for revenge for Belgorod and how they're only striking military targets. Let's hear what they have to say, and then I'll kind of use some other articles, some tweets, some Kiev Post, and other insight to help you understand what's actually happening. Let's listen to this first, and I'm going to black out some parts because they get to this montage in some places of some military activities that YouTube will not allow, and I'm going to make sure that I'm within YouTube's
The
rules.
Russian
Okay,
military
here we
says
go.
it has bombed several factories that produce missiles, drones, and other weapons in Ukraine. Warehouses with Western support.
Okay, so this might be true, but along the way, they're hitting lots of other stuff as well. While talking about only hitting military targets, they're not only hitting military targets.
Applied arms are also said to have been hit there. All right, let's get more details from our correspondent in Donetsk, Roman Kosarov. Roman, what else do you know about these Russian strikes at the moment?
Well, so far, the Russian Defense Ministry reported that it targeted various locations of the Ukrainian military-industrial complex in Kiev and other areas. In particular, those sites that stored and produced missiles, drones, and were also tasked with repairs of various weapons. Now, earlier on Tuesday...
Okay, now before you just dismiss what he has to say, the British Defense Intelligence Update was saying somewhat of the same thing. Since 29 December, Russia has increased the intensity of its long-range strike operations against Ukraine. Its forces have committed a significant proportion of the stock of the air-launched cruise missiles and ballistic missiles they had built up over recent months. The recent strikes likely primarily targeted Ukraine's defense industry. Now, primarily doesn't mean that they're not hitting residential buildings and playgrounds and a maternity hospital and whatever else along the way. But at least they're trying to do this. Like, that makes some rational sense. This contrasts with major attacks last winter, which prioritized striking Ukrainian energy infrastructure. Russia appeared to to restart this campaign by hitting energy sites in early December 2023. Okay, this operation suggests at least a temporary change of approach in Russia's use of long-range strikes. So, if they are at least trying to strike that, that's at least like normal warfare rather than a residential building. It's not that they're not hitting residential buildings too, but at least they're trying to do that. I mean, it even seems weird as I'm explaining that. Well, at least they're trying to do that. Yeah, but I think you can't just totally dismiss what he has to say, but they're not doing it nearly as effectively as you would think or as they think.
A series of powerful explosions were recorded in Kiev and surrounding region as well. Local social media showed fires that began in the Ukrainian capital as the result. CCTV cameras and also users online have recorded some of the explosions in the city too.
Now, one of the things that they do want to show is explosions within the city. In fact, I stumbled across this really interesting article that the SBU is blocking surveillance cameras hacked by Russia to identify targets in Kyiv. So, I mean, they're actually using that in order to gin up the propaganda mill.
The authorities in the Ukrainian capital have confirmed the explosions in the city and added that power supply have been cut to some of the areas in Kiev. Air alerts have been sounding in the capital and in some other cities of Ukraine as well. Officials are saying that air defense systems have been deployed. There were also reports that a series of explosions also occurred elsewhere in Ukraine on Tuesday. Meanwhile, the Russian leadership explained time and again that all of the strikes on the territory of Ukraine target exclusively military sites. And the latest attack.
Okay, they don't target exclusively military sites. And that's a bold-faced lie. Now, they might be trying to hit military sites too, or ammo depots or other things that constitute that as well. But when they talk about precision missiles, either they're not that precision, or they're lying, or they just don't care, or the leadership of the generals are lying to the politicians who are saying, like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, it's not, something's not right there, because they're hitting more than just military objects.
Was in response to the barbaric bombing of the city of Belgorod, where scores of people, including...
So they hit Ukraine with the largest missile strike the day before Ukraine hit Belgorod in response preemptively? Is that because no, that they were doing this beforehand. Then what happened in Belgorod was the next day, and then they hit back the next day in response, and the day after.
Young children have been killed. Let's take a listen.
What just happened in Belgorod is definitely a terrorist act.
Okay, if what's happening in Belgorod is definitely a terrorist act, then what you did the day before and the day after is, by definition, also a terrorist act.
Cover of 2 rockets, they struck using a multiple launch rocket system. This kind of weapon hits indiscriminately, and they used it to strike the city center, where our people were walking around just ahead of New Year's Eve. It was a targeted attack on civilians. Of course, it's a terrorist act. You can't call it anything else. Must we now respond in the same way? We do have the capability to strike the central square in Kiev, or any other Ukrainian.
Are these doctors, or what? Somebody help me with what these outfits are, because I'm not familiar with it.
City. But why would we respond like that? There are children walking there, mothers with prams. It's hard for me to even imagine this situation.
Why would we do that? We only hit military targets, is what he's trying to communicate. Remember, if you're in Russia and you're only seeing this one side of the story, you might be inclined to believe what he's saying.
Do we really have to act like this to hit city squares? We are striking with precision weapons in locations where the Ukrainian forces have their command centers, where there are concentrations of military personnel, mercenaries, and other military centers and facilities of this nature.
That's not the only thing that he's doing, though. If that was the only thing, that would be well within the rules of warfare, but it's not. And you can see that. The entire Western free press can see that that's not the case.
It's quite sensitive for them. This is how we will continue to act.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian nationalists of the Kiev regime struck the city of Belgorod in Russia once again on Tuesday. According to local authorities, 1 civilian was wounded and there was quite a lot of damage to private and social infrastructure. Russian Defense Ministry reported that the armed forces of Russia intercepted and destroyed at least 4 rockets from a Ukrainian multiple launch rocket system called Olha. Of course, that system is of Ukrainian origin.
All right, RT's Roman Kosrov reporting from Donetsk. Roman, thank you.
Okay, so that is how RT is putting this on. So let's look at a few things just for clarity. Okay, we already talked about the intelligence update from the British, and so they are actually trying to do some of this. So let's assume the best here. I mean, it seems weird to even say assume the best in this context, but let's assume that they're trying to do this too. That doesn't mean that they're not also creating just tremendous damage to plenty of civilian infrastructure, housing, playgrounds, parking lots, whatever it is. So that's happening. 450 missiles over the past 5 days as of yesterday, before yesterday's strikes with another 90 or so missiles. Okay, Russian planners almost certainly recognize the growing importance of relative defense industrial capacity as they are preparing for a long war. They really are preparing for a long war. As Ukrainian reported earlier on January 2nd, Russian troops launched a barrage of missiles and drones at Ukraine. Air defense forces downed 72 of 99 incoming targets, including 10 Kh-47M2 Kinzhal hypersonic missiles. Those are supposed to be like the best of the best. But again, 99 incoming targets. This was Ukrainian form. Now, here is the Kyiv Post. Ukraine's air defense repels world's largest combined missile attack using hypersonic weapons. Like, this is what was happening. So far this day, almost 100 missiles, that's 99, of various types have been launched that the enemy has planned their trajectories to cause as much damage as possible. This is utterly premeditated terror. And it seems like it is. If it's not hitting military targets, that's the definition of what terrorism would be. So, okay, along with the 10 Kinzhals, Russia fired 62 caliber cruise missiles and 35 Iranian-made Shahed drones at Ukraine, Zaluzhny said. Now, the question remains of why are they doing it though? Okay, well, this is one theory, and I don't know that it's true, but it made me go, Russia is trying to bait Ukraine into using up all its Patriot missiles, leaving itself vulnerable, experts say. Now, that could be what's going on. I really just don't know, but it is possible. Now, a little bit more. Meanwhile, Putin's regime spent about $620 million on the missile attack on Ukraine yesterday. $620 million. Like, that's a lot of money, but it's not in context. So let's look at this. Here is the 2022 military budget for Russia was about $75 billion. And for 2023, it was $84 billion. Do you know where their military budget is now? So for 2024, the new budget, which is awaiting approval from the State Duma, is going to be $349 billion. What was it before here? They were looking at 75 and 84. Russia's not planning on going anywhere, and they're not worried about spending this kind of money. Of course, where is it coming from? Oil and gas sector. So if you want to know how to defeat that, you attack the oil and gas sector, and I think that the Ukrainians are going to need to be able to do that eventually. That's going to have to be attacked. Okay. That helps you, I think, put some context to understanding why what's going on is going on. They're not worried about throwing away these missiles and indiscriminately hitting things while they're going after military targets, but really they're just as interested in destroying other civilian things as well in the neighborhood. So that's where they are, and they're not worried about the spending. And they're less worried about what the lines are on the front line, and they're adopting more of the asymmetric kind of attack that Ukraine's been doing to them. And that's my read of this. What's your read? Tell me in the comments below. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and the coffees, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.